but that we, as our representatives, even said, yes, this is the system that we are going to use for, to determine whether someone is financially worthy to take out a mortgage. Like, how did that even come down? Like, how did that system get into place? Maybe I'm just poorly financially schooled, but was there a time? And how did they determine that those particular essentially discriminatory standards were going to be put in place? I mean, was that just a product of the banking system, and Congress just went along with it essentially?
Well, the things that Leah is describing, it's easier. There are a limited number of banks and mortgage originators that issue mortgages, and they can electronically transmit all of the mortgage the history of any applicant for a loan. Mm-hmm. There are hundreds of thousands of landlords collecting rents. Many of them are small mom and pop operations. Some are larger, but none as giant as the big banks. And so it's a little bit more difficult for the credit scoring agencies to collect this information on rents than it is on past mortgage payments. So the system doesn't have to be intentionally, as Leah said, doesn't have to be intentionally racially discriminatory.
Right.
But once you have two groups of people in very different circumstances, if you're not careful, the most race-neutral policies can have a discriminatory effect, and that's what Leah was talking about.
Right. Laissez-faire isn't always that fair in the long run. So what are the key focuses of the modern movement against housing discrimination? Like, what are the things that need most to be changed at this point? And what has the progress been towards making those changes?
Well, we write about in Just Action that we need a activated civil rights movement around the country of local groups that are educated about how we came to be a segregated society and are activated and ready to take on issues in their own communities, advocate for policy changes, programmatic changes, new efforts by local institutions and companies to combat segregation. Now, there's no one policy or strategy that will accomplish all of this. There's many. It's a many layered system that maintains and perpetuates segregation, and it's many sort of pieces that have to be enacted and proposed and advanced in order to undo it and to challenge it. So we describe dozens of policies and programs that local groups can take on, and it sort of doesn't matter which one any community starts with because they're all going to be necessary. But we do all of the policies and strategies we discuss, they, as my dad mentioned, they look to the future to ensure that we don't continue to perpetuate and maintain segregated communities. And they look to the past to address the disparities that exist today because of all of those past government policies that created and maintained segregation. We need to kind of do both to tackle this issue. And then the strategies, they fall into two main categories. One is we want to increase investments in lower income segregated African American communities where the concentration of poverty is a direct result of government sponsored segregation. So as a remedy to the consequences of that segregation, we want to help make those communities areas of higher opportunity, of more investments, greater resources. And then when that happens, we understand that often gentrification results when a lower income community sees greater investments. People with higher incomes want to move in and displace or price out the longtime residents. So those strategies should be coupled with anti-displacement strategies to ensure that those longtime residents have a chance of staying in their neighborhood, things that help prevent unfair evictions or provide tenants with legal counsel when they're facing an eviction or protect them against rapidly rising rents. Those are some of those strategies. And then we also need to look at, segregated white communities, often suburbs, and how do we open up those communities to more diverse residents? That, there's a lot of strategies for doing that as well, including, we have to sort of start with zoning changes to ensure that we can build a more diverse housing options in those communities. Instead of only large single family homes, one per lot, we need to allow more diversity of housing options to have more diversity of housing affordability. So then we can have more diversity of residents in those communities. So that's one example of those types of strategies.
It's really interesting to me how often individual communities, especially, in suburbs, talk about, we don't want to build something that's, too tall, or that's going to block the view, or that's going to create too many traffic problems or something like that, when ultimately what that amounts to is maintaining that single family home dynamic, which is problematic in a lot of different ways. I mean, environmentally, in addition to anything else, but certainly means that there are fewer opportunities for people of color to live in a community, or anyone beneath a particular economic threshold. It just means more stratification, more discrimination, and more segregation altogether. And yet you hear these same things again come up in local committees again and again, and in many places it just doesn't seem to have changed in spite of the awareness of these larger housing problems.
Yeah, well, can I tell a story?
Please.
So I think it's true. We often hear about communities that block any kind of rezoning or housing development because they want to hold on to that single family aesthetic and the quote unquote character of their community. We researched and I interviewed people in a community in California, in Silicon Valley, a very expensive, exclusive area where median home prices are over $2 million. Very expensive place. Have, a history like everywhere else in the country of government policies that created that segregation and maintained that exclusivity of that neighborhood. Well, a group there they actually read The Color of Law, and they developed a training workshop for members of their community about what they called it Color of Law Menlo Park Edition. So their town was Menlo Park. They uncovered all of the laws, the zoning ordinances, all of the local policies and practices that created segregation in their community and that led to the affordable housing crisis that they're in. And they built up an organization around that training. And then a little while later, a local school district who couldn't hold on to teachers because they couldn't afford to live anywhere nearby. So 30% of teachers left the district every year. Yeah. They had a vacant site in Menlo Park, and they wanted to build affordable teacher housing on it. And some residents, in the area opposed it. They put a measure on the ballot that would have blocked that housing development.
Well,
and any other
teachers
future.
Always cause so many problems in a community. I mean, they're undesirable types, really, altogether.
Teachers, right? They really threaten the character of a community. Right. This group that was educated and starting to organize around these issues, they could see that this was another piece in a long history of policies that kept their community segregated, exclusive, out of reach for teachers and other, working families. And so they went door to door in a campaign to defeat this measure. They talked to residents all over their community, people who they didn't expect to support them, actually did, because they saw how their community had become so exclusive and they wanted more diversity. They wanted more accessibility. They ended up defeating the measure. So we hear a lot about, what are called NIMBYs, not in my backyard, folks who oppose this kind of housing development and win. But I want to lift up more of the stories of the times when people oppose that opposition to support affordable housing or to support more housing development, and they win because there's actually more support out there than we might think. We just have to reach those people and organize and come out to support the housing that our communities need.
No, you're here. And you mentioned Menlo Park. I think of, if I'm remembering correctly, there was a story that we were talking about on the show a few months ago, in which I think it was Steph Curry and his wife, Steph Curry of the Golden State Warriors, was opposed to affordable housing in Atherton, where he and his wife live. So I'm thinking, if somehow we can get a copy of Just Action into their hands and the Color of Law outlining the history and the action steps needed to be taken, maybe that NIMBY attitude would be a little less prevalent, because I think people need to be reminded, hey, this is stuff that impacts all of us. And it makes our communities worse, and it makes the society, just weaker. And if you create an environment in which people can have that same access to the generational wealth engine that is like home ownership, and they can do that, then it really pays dividends like generations down the line. We see what impact that it has had negatively. Let's get that going in a positive direction. Leah and Richard Rothstein, they are the authors of Just Action, How to Challenge Segregation Enacted Under the Color of Law. Richard Rothstein is also the author of The Color of Law, A Forgotten History of How Our Government Segregated America. Is there anywhere else that people can go to find out more about your work, your books, etc.?
Yeah, we have a website, justactionbook.org, where you can find out everything about our book and our appearances around the country. Also there, you can find a link to our Substack column, which is a free newsletter that we're writing to continue to the conversation around these issues. It's justaction.substack.com. Perfect.
Thank you so much for these wonderful books. Thank you so much for the work that you do on these really important issues. And Leah and Richard Rothstein, thank you for being with us today on Facepalm America.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We're going to be back in a moment and read a message from one of the listeners to Facepalm America. I'm Beowulf Rockland. This is Facepalm America. Facepalm America, I'm Beowulf Rockland. FacepalmAmerica.com is where you can go for more information on the show. And if you want to reach us by message or even get your voice on the show, you can message us at 202-656-6271. I want to read this message from Bob in San Jose. He's a listener to the podcast. We had some excitement today in East San Jose. Kamala Harris was here to speak about women's health care rights, but she was greeted by protesters who want the ethnic cleansing in Gaza to be stopped by the Biden-Harris administration. So that's, it's interesting. And I heard recently where Nancy Pelosi was confronted by protesters wanting to end the genocide in Gaza, and she told them to go back to China, where their headquarters was. Very strange. I didn't realize that China was secretly organizing protesters against the genocide in Gaza. Very interesting. Bob, thank you for that update. I really hope that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris will take action to stop this. I'm not holding my breath, but I truly hope that they will. And again, if you want to send a message to us here at the show, 202-656-6271 is the number to do it at. I want to thank Ace Elson and Rosabelle Hine, who are the producers of this program. And until next time, enjoy the day. Share this episode with a friend online. Please do. It helps us.